I want to talk about the English players at the young age group, because at the moment they've won the Under-20 World Cup, the Under-17 World Cup. They won the Toulon tournament in France in the summer. They're the Under-19 Euro champions and the Under-21 European semi-finalists. So, what a good crop of players. I'm going to get on to St George's Park, Jermaine, because you've been there. But you look at it, Paul, you think, if they can't take advantage of this crop of players, then they never will. Do you know what I mean? It's there now. The raw materials are there.
Yeah, I kind of think because there's a kind of, split between the FA and the Premier League, we're talking about FA international players here. When they get to 19, 20, 21, are they going to get the time in the Premier League, to go forward? Because a lot of these players play well now, and they don't get the chance to play in the Premier League. And this is the major thing. If they're not playing in the Premier League, they're not going to play in their national sides. But, there's a massive crop. I mean, what they've achieved is absolutely fantastic in all age groups. But be interesting how they go forward with it.
Well, you talk about time. So the England Under-21s, these are minutes played in the top division last season. The England Under-21s, 20,000 minutes in the top tier, compared with Spain, which is almost double that, 37,000 minutes, Germany 31,000 minutes, and Italy just short of 30,000 minutes. And just one more stat for you. When Gareth Southgate goes to a Premier League game, roughly only 33% of those who start are eligible. Hence, last week we were watching Arsenal v Swansea, and Gareth Southgate saying, we're going, why has he gone to Arsenal? Well, actually, it was Tammy Abraham who he's called up. But it shows that when he goes to a game, there's possibly only 2 or 3 players he's looking at who he's really seriously thinking about, unless Man City or Tottenham are playing, that are actually going to be in the squad.
Yeah, it's tough for him. That's why we're going to go on to the subject of St George's Park. That's why this kind of ethos of Team England is so important. I've been saying for a few weeks now that we're in a situation where we haven't got the luxury anymore for Gareth Southgate to be relying on going into the Premier League and be able to watch so many English players playing for the top teams, for Man United, for Arsenal, for Spurs. We haven't got that luxury anymore. We have top foreign players within our league, and that's why we love our league. I'm not sure any of us would like to change that. But that's why at the youth level, the coaching is improved. We're creating better teams that are going through better experiences, getting to World Cup finals, going through penalty shootouts, emotional moments, winning things. And I suppose it's up to them at St George's Park to kind of monitor them all the way through that process. But as Paul says, once they get to under-21 and first team, that's where I see it kind of disappearing to an extent, because a lot of it does heavily rely on you playing for your club. Yeah.
Let's just tell everybody, 2-2, Peter Crouch has scored. You might be right still. Oh. Peter Crouch has scored.
Peter Crouch was a header.
Was it a header? Somebody will hear soon enough it was a header. It's a fair bet it was a header, but it's finished.
How well has he done, Peter Crouch?
It's 2-2.
He's done brilliant, Peter Crouch.
Absolutely, hasn't he? So when you went to St George's Park, did you come away thinking, I can see now a plan, I can see exactly what they're trying to do, I can see a purpose, which maybe when you played for England at various levels, it was all a bit haphazard?
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose the plan going into the major tournaments is always the same. You want to win it, you want to progress. But it was more to do with, whenever I got picked, whether it was for under the 15s or 16s or the first team, it was a phone call, you're going to meet at this hotel in St Albans, with players that I maybe never even met before, a coach that I've never even met before. And it was all just a little bit off the cuff. Whereas at St George's Park, everybody meets within the same place, and the 15s can sit kind of within an arena. If Harry Kane walks by, they can go and speak to him and go and have a coffee and say, Harry, can you give me a bit of advice? And that kind of that feeling of, oh my word, I'm with the first team, I'm just walking into these superstars, that won't be there because they mix in with them every 2 minutes. So it's more of a club feel. It felt like I was at a training ground rather than going to meet some of the England first team. And all of that is good. All of that is much better. And I think if you put that in line with the fact that we have got, I think, better coaches now as well at youth level, then we're creating better players. But obviously the question is, how do we get it from where we are now to the first team winning?
What about the academies? I mean, you've got experience and exposure and talk to people in and around academies. Is that in line with, we're talking about England, obviously, but it goes for all the countries in the British Isles. Is it in line with them?
Burgers. The reason why we made professional footballers is because we were good enough. I really think that where the opportunity's easier for us at the time. Well, you're looking at the team I come through, the class of '92, the first team at the time: Paul Ince, Brian Robson, Lee Sharp, Mark Hughes, Brian McClare, Bruce Pallister. Scholes had a chance, Beckham had a chance, Neville had a chance, so they were good enough. Therefore, they got into the first team. People might say, as Jermaine said, we've got some fantastic foreign players in the Premier League, but that Manchester United team, which those players make the breakthrough in, were good enough and therefore went on to have great careers.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think
I'm just saying from my experience,
I think it's getting the opportunity, and I got the opportunity.
If they're good enough, they will, surely. Loftus-Cheek, maybe not Chelsea, but he's got the Crystal Palace.
Well, this is the big question. Would they be good enough if they got the chance? That's the other thing. I mean, you look, it's the same argument from the other end, isn't it?
Opportunities were a lot easier when we were younger. You could see...
That team those players broke into, what a team that was.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. But
one of the best teams ever.
But the point I'm trying to make is that when we first started out, you're only slightly younger, but you got. I started out in Norwich youth team into the reserves. I was the next one in when there was an injury in the first team. I was doing well in the reserves. I was the next one in. They had nobody else to pick. That's how I got my opportunity. Now the squads are so big and vast, have so much depth now. I wouldn't have got the opportunity these days.
But if you're good enough, surely you would have.
No, it doesn't work, because if there are people playing in front of you all the time, the pressure on Premier League managers now...
Phil Foden, will he get an opportunity in Manchester?
Yeah, but the pressure on the Premier League managers now is that if you lose 4 or 5 games, you get the sack. So why then would a Premier League manager put his faith in an 18-year-old, however talented he is, rather than an experienced international...
And Alan Pardew said that this week. Alan Pardew said it this week. He said, I wouldn't do it. I would go and get an experienced 25-year-old from Switzerland, for argument's sake, because it's a safer bet. The 18-year-old might be better in the long term.
Listen, as far as I'm concerned, the problem you get, and the football has changed, and Chris, when we played, we had a kind of process, youth team, reserve team, where you mix with first-team players who are injured and they come down. Pontins League. Nowadays, you've got the under-23s, and the next league is into the first team.
That's right.
The gap is so vast, so how can you take the trust on someone playing well for the under-23s than to go into the first team in the Premier League?
You imagine those under-17s, the jubilation after winning that World Cup. The reality is, in the next season or two, a lot of them won't kick on. They will see there is no way forward. We could see a way into the first team. I don't think you see it.
We're only talking about right at the top here, by the way, Pugas. We're talking about the Premier League. There is another avenue within the Championship. We've got some fantastic clubs, great crowds, money to be spent as well. That's how I made my breakthrough. I was at a club pretty similar to kind of Chris's story and some of our stories where Forest were going into administration. They had no choice but to turn to their youth team, which I was a part of. Got to take your opportunity when you get it. And then when I got into, when I was bought by Newcastle United, I had stock. Someone had put a lot of money behind me and said, listen, we want you. And then at that point, when you got that kind of someone spending £5 million, they have to play you. They have to. And then it's up to you to kind of take it forward. So there's another route.
Are we saying it doesn't matter how good this lot is? Still, we think that there is a bottleneck when it comes into getting to a Premier League team. Because
Ben Woodburn.
Yes.
Ben Woodburn's.
He's not playing regularly.
Yeah, but he's not regularly. But he's made a breakthrough. He scored his first international goal for his.
But he's not playing regularly. But you were saying a stat earlier about the Spanish players, the German players. I mean, with respect, starting in the Championship isn't the top level, and we're talking about international football. So you were talking about players playing at the top level in their countries. In England now, they're having to resort to going out on loan in the Championship. Is that good enough?
So are we saying that nothing is likely to change then? Calvert-Lewin Calvert-Lewin is the one who actually from the under-20 team who has played regularly, but a lot of them haven't. And you mentioned Phil Foden, who's obviously a fantastic player. The player of the tournament, wasn't he, the under-17s? But he's playing at Manchester City. Yeah, exactly. Manchester City.
He's not going to get, is he?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what you should do, just get a Welsh coach.
What does that mean?
Just get a Welsh coach.
You what?
Just get a Welsh coach, innit? It's Cooper, the Welsh coach.
But on a serious note, when can you see Foden breaking into the Manchester City team?
It'd be very, very difficult, wouldn't it? But
that's the point.
But what they used to do in the class of '92, they used to go out on loan. Beckham went to Preston. Yeah. All these players. Keith Gillespie went out on loan. As JJ said, they learned to. To play in a...
But Robbie, with respect, that was 25 years ago. But the point...
Let's take, for instance, Phil Foden, because he won the Golden Ball, didn't he, of the World Cup. If he was to go and play for a Nottingham Forest, a Derby, a Norwich for 6 months, would that help him in his development?
Well, of course, it would help him, but that's not the point.
But the point is, how are these players going to get opportunities?
No. It could be the point if he still turns into a very good player and plays for England.
But we're talking
about the top level. We're talking about a different avenue, then, aren't we? Where you got the opportunity 25 years ago.
What we're talking about is this group of players, or a mix of the under-17s and the under-20s, maturing into a very, very good England team capable of winning something. That's what we're talking about. Now, if it happens to be that Phil Foden has to play for Nottingham Forest rather than Manchester City, but is still an outstanding England international, well, that's the way of the world now.
Until you get the quota system in terms of a percentage of England players having to play in a Premier League team, it's not going to change, Mark.
Hey, Brexit might change that.
I agree with you. I think you're spot on.
Yeah, no, but of course you're right, but you can't do anything about it while you're within the EU.
And a lot of these kids, as they get to 17, 18, 19, because they're Chelsea's, the Manchester City's, the big clubs, a lot of them are just happy to stay there. You know, I mean, they have at kudos. You know, my son went to go to Notts County. You know, he was at Liverpool. He could have signed a 4-year contract. But he went to go to Notts County because he wanted to play football.
What is it interesting? I know he's injured, but Chalobah's in the England squad, having left Chelsea permanently. Abraham and Loftus-Cheek's in the England squad, having left Chelsea temporarily. But clearly, there was no way that they were going to be in the England squad because they weren't even playing for Chelsea. But now they're playing regularly. All three of them are playing regularly in the Premier League. They get an opportunity for England. So maybe it might be, as we talked about Phil Foden, Loftus-Cheek's, that they don't get in the top 4 or 5 for whatever reason, but they can still be very good England internationals, part of a very good England team playing for mid-range Premier League teams.
I totally agree with that. And weird thing about people like Nathaniel Chalobah as well, he's actually got more international experience than he has league experience. And if you're trying to create international players to perform on an international stage, he's almost the perfect person in a really weird way. But the argument is we don't play first-team football. Well, he's got 80-odd, 90-odd caps, penalty shootouts, finals. He's got every experience you can possibly have as an international player at youth level. But to kind of cross over, we're then going, well, you have to play first-team football.
Yeah. Do Premier League managers care about the English national team?
Well, let's put it one further back. The Premier League owners care. The owners care.
And that does everything. Now, in Germany, I think things are different.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're following this on social media, and Jules has got your reactions.
Yes, lots of you getting in touch and following this debate very closely. Keep your comments and questions coming in throughout the afternoon. Amari Thomas thinks that young players get overworked from a young age, so they hit their peak too early. Mookie says there are far too many mediocre overseas players that are keeping our young English talent out. And a question for Jermaine from Dave Newman. Dave is asking you, if Ruben Loftus-Cheek was signed permanently by Crystal Palace, do you think he wouldn't get called up? And has he only got his call up because he's actually permanently signed at Chelsea?
No. Yeah. I think...
There has been an argument about big club-itis before,
No, it's the opposite to that. He's been called up because he's probably playing first-team football now for Crystal Palace. It's not to do with the fact that he's a Chelsea player, no.
Yeah. And let's be honest, it probably helps that Gareth Southgate, obviously he did play for Aston Villa, played for Middlesbrough as well, so he's not... he didn't play for Manchester United all his career. He's not obsessed with the big clubs. He knows...
No, he's not. And also...
he's played round the clubs, as
He was under 21s manager.
Yeah.
He knows Ruben Loftus-Cheek. He knows Jesse Lingard. He knows... he knows all these players. Yeah. He knows them all. So he's kind of watched them and he knows they're there and ready and waiting. Yes, he's probably waiting for a few more first-team games, but he knows what they can do on the international stage.
You know when they say about overworked? I don't know what the lads think, but I totally disagree with that. When I was coming through, we used to train every day, 2 sessions a day. We used to go and play at Marine, Morecambe, muddy pitches. Overworked in this day and age. I'm not having that.
But they're well coached at a young, and that's the point. But the bottom line is they get to a point and they're not going to play regular first-team football at the Premier League clubs.
We'll pick this up after 2:45 and after 3 o'clock on BT Sports Score. Just to finish with now, do you think? Listen, this is marvellous, fantastic, well done, but it's not going to translate into anything. Or do you think actually? There's a group here, and if Tammy Abraham has shown, and Loftus-Cheek has shown, and Chalobah has shown, you don't have to play for Chelsea. Let's take Man City and Tottenham out of it because they're doing an outstanding job and they're the backbone of the England team. But you need 23 in the squad to go to a World Cup. Do you think actually the future does look brighter? I'm cautiously optimistic it might happen at the international level.
You've got to be optimistic, obviously, when you look at what those age groups have done. From 17s, 19s, 20s. Now, if you can, get a generation out of those 3 groups. Yeah. And not just from a football side of view, from a mental side of view. Playing in big tournaments, because that's where we've always struggled, England, as a national team. When it actually matters, can we deal with that environment? So it's not just about the coaching, it's the mental side of things. And we talk about leaders and characters, which Southgate talks about. If you can form some leaders within those groups, the 17s, 19s and 20s, then we've got to be hopeful.
Just one quick question for the guys who all play for England. Is it easier now to get an England cap than it ever has?
Yes, for sure.
Well, Steve Bruce didn't play for England. No. Says it all, doesn't it?
Gary Palace done.
Hashtag BT Sports Score. Robbie's going to have the iPad balanced on his knee, like a grandchild, throughout the afternoon. So you can get in touch with him and ask him anything you want. We'll carry on talking about this as well. See you at 2:45.